Hi everyone, Jake Celebrukins here. Before we get started, in case you don't make it to the end, the ancillary review of books and A Meal of Thorns are free and ad-free, and we plan to keep them that way. We'd really appreciate your support. Go to patreon.com/ancillary-review to become a supporter. $1 a month really does help. $5 a month would be great and gets you access to our Discord and monthly newsletter. Okay, on to the episode. A critic is a creature who has views quite like a camel's. Flowers and fruit he scorns. In the flower garden of the honeyed muse, he starves unless he finds a meal of thorns. Welcome to A Meal of Thorns, a critical book club from the Ancillary Review of Books. I'm Jake Celebrukins. Each episode, we ask critics, writers, and scholars to talk us through the books that have lodged in their minds, their pet theories, their possibly problematic faves, the thorny ideas and haunting imagery that they keep coming back to. This week, we're talking to Juan Martinez about Michael McDowell's novel, Gilded Needles. Juan is the author of the collection Best Worst American and the horror novel Extended Stay, both of which you should really pick up. And he has short stories, poetry, and other writings published all over the place, including recent work with Plowshares, Chicago Quarterly Review, and Nightmare Magazine. Juan is the fiction editor for Jackleg Press, and teaches writing and presumably reading at Northwestern and Story Studio. Shout out to Story Studio. They're really cool. If you're in the Chicago area, check them out. And you should probably follow Juan online for regular doodle content. Juan, thank you so much for joining. How you doing?
I'm doing so well. Thank you again for the invite.
Yeah. Before we get into the novel today, I wanted to ask, what else have you been reading? What else have you been thinking about? What's cool?
Oh yeah, so I just finished The Reformatory, which if anybody is looking for like an excellent, awesome, creepy ghost story, this one is amazing, ambitious, fantastic, just really just in every which way, deeply satisfying. And I'm also now like about halfway through, nearly done with Eden Robbins' Remember You Will Die, which is a whole novel that's told in obituaries.
Oh, cool.
And it is deeply satisfying. It's funny, it is weird. It's got like AIs that are sort of on the run. It's got like this sort of lovely David Mitchell vibe.
Okay.
So yeah, those have been like, and I'm teaching a class on grad class at Northwestern on plot. Like plot. So I'm just going back over some theory of plot, but also we're doing it through like autofiction and the campus novel. So it's been an excuse to go back to some like classic campus novels. But also I just finished Sofia Samatar's, The Practice, the Horizon, and the Chain.
Yeah.
Loved it. And we're starting off with that one. So that's
cool.
sort of, what about you? What are you reading right now?
Just before I say that, that's a great one to kind of like, I think, as an opener for a campus fiction theory, just because it's so nice and tight, but like really rich.
It is so tight. It's so well plotted. And then also it is such an interesting and valid critique of the way in which a campus is arranged.
I was talking about that on an earlier podcast, that I had been reading that to review it. And I was reading it the week that Columbia started cracking down on the student protests, and it was just like this like juxtaposition that was really wild. But yeah, I've been reading a lot, as always. I think the things that have stuck in my mind the most right now are, I really loved Ananda Lima's Craft.
Oh my God.
Which is just so great. It is a story collection, I guess, but it's also like sort of a novel, or at least some kind of coherent metafictional thing. I really loved how much it's working with kind of showing the writing process in this really like sly, clever, funny kind of way. I mean, really, really like deeply felt too, but there's a chapter in there that's nothing but like workshop critique notes.
I love the workshop critique one.
I was just screaming. I'm like, I know these people. I know how bad this is. Yeah, really, really good. So yeah, like that, and also really liked Jesse Ball's book coming out here, The Repeat Room.
Oh shoot, yeah, it's been on my radar, and
Hmm.
I don't think I've actually put it on my Goodreads, and I should.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, I feel like it's pretty classic ball, kind of absurdist, very like minimalist, but really good. It's a dystopia that feels a little more classic in a lot of ways and stuff I've read from him, but it also has these like really astonishing passages. So there's this point where the protagonist, who's basically in this like dystopian like judicial jury system and needs to evaluate someone's crime and kind of judge them, and they do that by like kind of, it's not super clear, but maybe by making him kind of like relive it. But it has this passage when he's kind of like going down and coming back up from that experience that's like this disjointed, hallucinogenic, but like really deeply felt passage. It's maybe like 8, 10 pages long that just floored me. Because like he set, like Ball sets up like page after page of this really like kind of minimalist, like kind of like cynical, kind of slightly absurd kind of situation. And then when the words just like fly off the page, it just like nails you. Yeah, really, really good.
Well,
Enjoyed that
he's
a
such
lot.
a good stylist.
Yeah. But yeah, today we're going to talk about Gilded Needles. Oh, oh, you've got the original Avon cover. Oh, nice.
Ooh.
Yeah, I have the new one, which is Magnolia, which is still cool, but not as cool as the original, I don't think. But so, in his too short writing career, Michael McDowell wrote horror novels, mysteries, thrillers, and work for the screen, including Beetlejuice, Tales from the Darkside, and Tales from the Crypt. McDowell passed away in 1999 at the age of 49. Gilded Needles was originally published by Avon in 1980. It's an intricate historical revenge story set in New York City in the 1880s. The novel follows a large cast, mostly divided between two families: the judges, preachers, lawyers, and high society ladies of the Stallworth family on the one hand, and on the other, Black Lena Shanks and her female band of thieves, forgers, prostitutes, and abortion providers. Against a backdrop of opium dens, corrupt city politics, and crushing poverty, the Shanks and Stallworths set out to destroy each other. This book was phenomenal. This is my first time reading it. And my context for this was, so I'd been asking podcast potential guests what they'd like to read. And I kind of have like a laundry list of like things I'm interested in talking about. And one of them was the kind of like semi-forgotten mass market boom and how those books influenced us. And Juan, I want you to like paint us a picture of like how did you run into this novel? How did you encounter this the first time around?
So one of the weirdest things about McDowell for me is that when I was in Colombia as a teenager, my sort of access to like horror novels, which was the thing that I loved the most, was sort of like determined by whatever ended up on used bookstores in
Mm,
Bogota, right? Like so it was a really random set of books, and at one point or another, a copy of McDowell's Gilded Needles sort of landed right there, and
mm,
it was like you could tell that whoever had, because it was that and Ted Klein's The Ceremonies like right next to each other, and then
mm.
I think some Peter Straub, like it was
Okay.
like definitely definitely a demographic that had left these books in Colombia at one point or another.
Huh.
So that's how I found it. I read it, loved it. Didn't really make the connection with the fact that he was also the screenwriter for Beetlejuice and
Yeah.
Nightmare Before Christmas, and had a hand in A Nightmare Before Christmas.
Hmm.
But that was my initial sort of thing. And then when I was writing my own horror novel, I then go back and reread that one. I mean, I had sort of had the elementals as a sort of like a model for like how do you do a creepy haunted house story, right? But
Mm,
Gilded Needles was always in the back. And then when we were living in Andersonville, we were going down Glenwood, like the sort of like street that is sort of like rife with little free libraries.
hmm.
And like this copy of Gilded Needles was there.
Oh, cool.
Um, and I picked it up and I've been lugging it from place to place for maybe 7 years now,
Mm,
8 years. And then so when you approached me, I said, "Oh my God, I've been wanting to reread this book." Number one, I said like I hope to God it holds up, right?
hmm.
And I mean, I think that we're going to talk about this too, like the ways in which it does hold up, and then the ways in which we can definitely think about this as a
Hmm.
problematic fable. But that's, I mean, I think that's an interesting sort of like through line of like 80s horror and race. I think
Yeah.
it's always
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of flabbergasted by this, reading it for the first time. And I think one of the things that jumped out to me the most, because like going into it like blind, like going into just not knowing anything about it, was being like immediately bowled over by the like deeply researched historical
Oh my
setting.
God. Yeah.
And even as much as the setting that, because a lot of my reading was 80s paperbacks, this also stylistically feels like it's trying to harken back to an earlier way of writing.
It is, right? I mean, there's this sort of beautiful kind of, I mean, gilded isn't a bad word for it, right? There's
Hmm.
this sort of deliberate sort of precision, but also like ornateness to the to the prose that is doesn't feel old. I mean, it's not purple. It's like,
Yeah.
it's a fairly, it's very precise when it comes to like period detail in ways that felt really I think I was like, my wife was asking, "What are you reading?" And I said, "Well, I think this is a little bit like Edith Wharton with more murder,
Hmm.
right?"
Yeah.
And yeah,
I was thinking a lot, to be honest, about like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I
oh
think just
yeah,
just for the kind of like the time setting, which is so funny because those those are maybe set a decade later or so, but are much more kind of sanitized. Like the poverty and the desperation in those stories is kind of at a remove. You kind of know it's there and it's motivation for people, but it's not in your face the way it is in this novel. And weirdly, I was thinking about two things that I don't know if I'm right connecting them here, but one was I was thinking about Victor Hugo actually.
oh yeah,
Just because this novel, it's not really like reveling in the tragedy, although it is like rife with it. It's like everything here is kind of tragic, but it's I don't know, it's not like setting it up sort of melodramatically. It's just kind of like, no, this is all really bad, and people are kind of like doing what they can do in their situation. And that reminded me in a way of like my early experience with like Les Mis or The Hunchback or something like
yeah,
that. And in a very weird way, I kept thinking historically, like this is set during the narrow window when the American Western was actually a thing, right? Because there's really only
exactly.
like maybe like a 30-year period historically where there were like, cowboys as we think of them, in the popular genre. And so it's so strange to be reading this like dead in the middle of Manhattan, but with some of that like kind of lawless, kind of just like people just kind of meeting out violence without a lot of checks and balances. Even the people who are like supposedly the checks and balances, right? Like the cops and the judges here are just kind of taking this almost Wild West kind of approach.
And the journalist too, right? I mean, there's like
Yeah.
sort of real sort of like Mark Twain slash kind of like yellow journalism that's
Mm-hmm.
happening as we're going to, no, I completely agree. I think those are really good models. And what you were saying too about like sort of like the way in which this is I don't know, McDowell's sort of like slight remove from the fact that there's real suffering that he's sort of portraying unflinchingly, but we're not, I hesitate to use the word enjoyment, but there's like this slight sort of like cold-blooded humor
Mm-hmm.
about without I think can we give stuff away or is it
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
okay. So like one of the like the things that I find kind of both incredibly cruel about the novel, but really funny is that one of our most sympathetic characters, right? The daughter, the ones who are like the clear moral center
Oh
who
yeah.
goes
Uh-huh.
to the Black Triangle,
Mm-hmm.
does all these, like basically says, oh my God, like my family's terrible. They're exploiting everybody. These people need help and not like fake help. They need actual help.
Mm-hmm.
She he McDowell kind of drags her through hell. She loses her
Yeah.
hair. She just becomes this sort of skeletal, monstrous figure,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I kind of love that this is where he decides to take her, right? I mean, she
Yeah.
lives, which
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
more than you can say about most of the
Puts
people
her
in
in
the
the upper
novel.
percentile, yeah. But yeah, no, you're totally right. And like there's that scene where she's so she's gone to the Black Triangle, which is this neighborhood that is full of crime that where like we have these two families. We have kind of like a crime family and then like an upstanding family. And the upstanding family has kind of decided to destroy the Black Triangle for kind of for just the good press and like they have like political ambition.
It's completely, it is, I mean, it is so cynical, right?
Hmm.
There's no desire to improve anything in there and no desire to like, you know, do anything for the people there. It's just we need the press, right?
Yeah, if we get good press, we'll get a better shot at like getting elected next time around. But yeah, when Helen, who's the virtuous daughter, is
Yeah.
there and she's been trying to help them and she's kind of like collapsed. It's I do love like the historical that like it's not clear from what she just kind of has like brain fever. not super clear what it is. But when she's like lying there and she's been paradoxically sort of like taken in, and sort of minimally taken care of at least by this crime family, and her kidnapped niece is like, they're like, play with me, Auntie. Like she's like laying there like shaking. I'm like, this is surreal. This is, I don't know what this is.
It is so satisfying. And then like that's the niece that, she's a spoiled brat at the beginning and sort of finds herself
Hmm.
flourishing once she
Yes.
sort of like becomes adopted. But and then
Yeah.
her brother's sold to the, I mean, basically sold to the circus. I know
Hmm.
that's not quite like the, but
Basically, yeah.
yeah.
The 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 revenge twist, which we haven't even done the whole setup
Oh,
here,
we
but
should
like,
talk about that. Yeah, but
but that split with the children, right? Who are like, I mean, literally innocent in this. And they're basically like, well, one of them we're just going to adopt. She's cool. And the other one, for no particular reason, like he sucks. We're going to sell him to the circus. Like, yeah, it's really strange.
no, no, it's just I love that. And I think that there is something in McDowell, like if we follow that through line into like Beetlejuice or Nightmare Before Christmas
Mm,
and into his novels, there's this tremendous sympathy for the children or of like awful or indifferent
yeah. Oh, interesting. That's a good point.
parents, right?
That's
But
a good through line.
yeah.
I, I was thinking through this a lot. So they're like, there's a lot of like pretty annoying modern discourse about like likable protagonists, right? And like, right? And that like, the protagonists of the novel should be virtuously good and we should sympathize with them. And not only is that not the case here, I found myself really kind of marveling at McDowell not really clearly flagging like quote unquote a protagonist. I
Yeah.
think there's a way that you can frame that this is all about Lena Shanks, right? It's kind of her story. She's kind of the mover. He's no more sympathetic to her, particularly, I think, than any other character. And each chapter will jump between many, many viewpoints. And even though we get to see that the stalwarts are like, they're kind of motivated by just greed and they want more power, they're not, for the most part, I think, except for the judge, they're not portrayed super villainously. They're just kind of doing what you would kind of expect someone to do in that situation. It's a really odd way of setting up character that, I don't know, to me it felt really realistic, and I kept kind of like not knowing what was going to happen. I kept finding myself like, wait, like, am I rooting for Lena? Like, kind of. But then like the
What are we
perspective
rooting
would
for,
shift, and
right?
I'm like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, maybe I'm not rooting for them. I'm not sure. And it left me really unsure because this is a case of like justice has been meted out like too harshly, right? And that's the revenge kind of prompt. But also Lena's husband was murdered like before was executed before the book starts. But like he was part of a Confederate plot to burn down New York City, which is like, I'm like, if you're gonna hang somebody, like,
That's not a bad, yeah.
yeah.
No, no, that is, I love sort of the sort of the very wobbly morality of this book.
Mm,
And I mean, I think on the one hand, everything you're saying is we can also like boil it down to like a very sort of simple but not fair sort of like, oh, the low lives are really the people who are like have the moral upper hand, and then like
hmm
the so-called respectable people are really disrespectable, right? And
hmm
then what I love about what you point out is that it's McDonald's actually no, like these privileged people, they're just weak and greedy, but
hmm
recognizably human, right? And then this these lowlifes are like Lena is not a good person. She is I love her so
hmm
much. So one of my favorite movies of recent times has been Triangle of Sadness. I don't know if you've seen it.
Mm-mm.
It's a yacht full of rich people that who basically halfway through and they're all awful, and then halfway through there's a shipwreck, and then there's an inversion of
Okay.
power, right? It's really brutal, really, really funny. And I remember a critic saying, well, it's a little bit like shooting fish in a barrel, but the fish had it coming, right?
That's good. Yeah.
But it kind of reminded me a little bit of Gilded Needles in the
Mm.
sense that we're at a weird spot where like I don't know, like the inequity and
Yeah.
the
Right.
degree of like injustice
Hmm.
is so blatant. The levels of deregulation that we've gotten to are so bad
Right.
that there's a good argument to be made for like understanding why everybody's sort of behaving the way they are,
Hmm.
I guess.
Yeah.
And I feel that for Lena, it's like you do what you need to do to get by, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so like so two things on that. So one is that like one of the things I loved about this is even though this novel feels very deeply historically researched and it feels really like
And oh my
authentically
God, and we
set.
should talk about that too, because it
Yeah.
is like we'll talk about it. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine. No,
Yeah.
so like it is that, but it's also like it's not setting out to educate you. You know, it's not like trying to be like, let me walk you through how New York politics work in this time, you know. That's all in the background. And that made me think about like this time period as this time period, you know, after the Civil War that is not talked about or taught very much, you know, maybe except for the Western expansion.
Hmm.
And this is the time period of Reconstruction failing, right?
Yeah.
And this is the time period that is setting up the kind of Gilded Age that's going to result, right, in the Great Depression and kind of like all these terrible problems, you know, down the line. And to see those sort of like inequities like starting here, and like McDowell's not lecturing you about it, but he's really showing it to you. And then to have a character like Lena who like yeah like not a quote unquote good person but she's so competent without being like ludicrously competent and she's a relatively quiet character like she doesn't speak much English, right? She's more German speaking.
Right, she's German, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
But she is like the mastermind behind everything that happens. And also like I kept thinking this that like if this novel were published today, like all of the blurb coverage, you know, all of the marketing press for it would be about female bandits strike back, you know, because it's almost all women. It's
It's
this, you know,
almost all
it's
women, right?
almost all
Yeah.
women. And the
Including female boxers, right? Which we,
yes.
and yeah,
Oh my gosh,
I
so
mean,
good.
queer female boxers, I should
Uh-huh.
yeah.
The sapphic pugilist. Like, oh, it's so good. And it's just there
Yeah.
in the you know, and like the novel doesn't like underscore or make a big deal about it, but it's a lot of ways about yeah, about women and queer people finding these ways to strike back at the system. Yeah, that I loved. Really, really good.
No, it's such a little gem of a book. It just makes me so, so happy. And it's all those moments. But we should talk a little bit too about like the ways in which like the texture of this novel is kind of deeply researched. I mean,
Mm,
everything from like the invitations,
mm-hmm,
the how things hinge on like certain cultural rites that happen in New York.
mm-hmm,
It happened in New York apparently
mm-hmm.
around New Year's, right?
Right. Yeah, I kept pulling up a map of the city to just kind of think about the geography of it and people moving around.
Mhm.
And yeah, so much of it is like anchored in how people move around and like how people send messages to each other. You know, it has all of that like I don't know. I really like the kind of like stock texture historical stuff of like what people are wearing. The specificity of the objects, particularly because like pawning and like thieving is such a big part of it that you get this real sense of like what the material situation is like a lot. Yeah, I thought that was really well done. I was just gonna say I don't remember where I read this, but I remember someone saying that we need to have in historical novels, they need to have swatches of fabric in the back so that you can tell like what bombazine is. Like I had to look up like what's bombazine. Like, oh, okay, interesting. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember the thing that I looked up, which it felt very much of its period. And so I lost my little index card where I had like all my terms
Ah,
for it. So uh, early on, when McDowell is describing the Lena's gold room,
mm-hmm.
which is all gold, which
Yeah.
felt very, again, of its time, but definitely very 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there was a particular word for like the covering that you put around couches, like couch.
Oh.
And I wish I could remember that, but it was such a weird little detail, and I immediately knew what he was talking about once I
Mm-hmm.
looked it up. But yeah, no, there's the fabrics, the texture of those rooms, the details around, like materials. How do you melt one material to sort of disguise it, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of that was so good. I mean, we haven't gotten to like the opium, like the
Yeah.
way which opium then etiquette, which I
Mm-hmm.
thought was delightful. But then also, I got really caught up in the ways in which paper is sort of showing up here and
Mm.
there, right? The invitations at the beginning, but the little coffin invitations
Oh my
for like the
gosh.
funeral invites were so good, right? Uh,
Yeah. So there's this
yeah.
scene where the stalwarts are sitting around like enjoying like I don't know Sunday dinner or something, And they think they've triumphed. They think they've like, they're making success on crushing the Black Triangle. They've driven these criminals out. And then they just get these little invitations to their own funerals. And I was just like screaming. I was like, that's so good.
It was so awesome. And it's such a satisfying thing. I mean, and I should point out, even the children get their own
Yes.
tiny little invitations for. So it's very dark, but
Hmm.
it's also, yeah, it was, and that's also something that I wanted to ask you what you felt about, because it is ostensibly a horror novel, right?
Hmm.
And the latter, I want to say, 20 pages
Hmm.
do revel in some like grand guignol, delightful, elaborate
Yeah.
death scenes, right? But that's like 20 pages of out of like a 300-page novel, right?
Hmm.
Or I dropped the book. I'm gonna check it out right now. But
Yeah.
that is I think 341 according to my
Uh-huh.
the A1 one, right? And I was thinking about how awesome genre can be, but specifically horror, where like if you've been promised, like no, somebody's definitely gonna get an opium an opium pipe
Uh-huh.
jammed through their eyeball. That's
Hmm.
gonna happen.
Hmm.
Not for a bunch of like hundreds of pages. Can you hang
Hmm.
on? Like, yeah, we can hang on.
Yeah, no, that
Right?
that totally. If you had just like handed me this book without telling me anything, and maybe like with the cover ripped off, so it didn't give me any clues, you know what I mean? I would have just been reading like, oh, okay, this is like a historical novel. But going into it, knowing that like this is kind of like a horror classic and sort of like a writer that people have strong feelings about as a horror writer, it made me just tense all the way through. And it wasn't until the funeral card scene that I kind of had a sense of like how it was going to go. Because I was kind of
Yeah.
like, I don't know, I can see this going a lot of different directions. I can see a lot of people going down. But that one, the moment when I was like, oh, like actually like Lena is off screen like a 1980s horror movie, like just setting up the kills, and that's when
Yeah.
it started just like really going. But yeah, it did make for an interesting experience because I kept reading this pretty straightforward historical novel, but like knowing that there's some kind of really like gruesome thing coming, and it changed how I approached it.
It's also weird. Like I think we were talking about this before we started recording. I'm gonna be teaching a class on plot, right? On
Mm,
like how plot sort of like, and so much of it is, suspension and withholding information until
mm-hmm,
it's right. And so like knowing immediately, oh my gosh, something's gonna happen just from the promise of the cover, the promise of all the paratext
mm-hmm,
around this, right? And then not having it happen, having that the funeral invitations, and then the part where I was like, oh my God, he's such a great master of like getting you, is the moment when the youngest two children, the two children get kidnapped,
yeah,
because you kind of feel like, okay, the wheels are off. This guy can do that.
mm-hmm,
Is an astoundingly cruel scene.
mm-hmm.
And
It made me think like Trevor's a movie rather than a film, which rather than a book, which I try not to do. But it made me think of the scene in Jaws when the shark gets a little boy, because that's like you don't see it, but that's the scene in the movie where you're like, oh, this is real, like anything can happen, and that's what this felt like in terms of like the revenge story here to me, where it's like, oh, like the two kids are gone, and you don't see them again for a bit, right? You don't know that
yeah,
they're not just murdered for a while.
yeah,
Um,
no,
yeah.
it was so good. And I mean, and it feels like, Lena loses a daughter, right? So like you
Hmm.
sort of like you know that there's a real sort of like equivalency here, or like a
Hmm.
sense of, and we haven't even gotten to the idea that like, oh, sort of like what a great structure this is, right? Like
Mm.
how I mean, Victor Hugo is certainly, I mean, Count of Monte Cristo sort of like I
Yeah,
would think would
totally.
be like another sort of like great
Hmm.
thing, but also for me, like one of my favorite, again, to break the rule of like not going to movies, but
Yeah.
Dr. Phibes, right? Like
Say that again.
oh my gosh, Dr. Phibes. I don't know if you've seen it.
Oh no, I don't know this.
Oh my God, it is late 60s Vincent Price,
Okay.
directed by somebody who's mostly known for directing the Avengers, the British,
Oh, okay. Yeah, the TV.
but
Yeah.
the whole thing, it's kind of like a neo-Victorian kind of like thing, but Dr.
Hmm.
Phibes, uh, seven surgeons sort of mess up and fail to save his wife, and he
Okay.
decides, I want to take revenge on all seven.
Okay.
And that's the whole movie. Like that's how the movie starts. And
Okay.
then Vincent Price playing an organ, and then
Sold.
how is he gonna kill the seven people? And it's an incredibly psychedelic movie. It's
Mm,
really funny and goofy and beautiful, but it also made me think like I don't know what it is about like revenge as a
mm.
great engine
Uh-huh.
for yeah.
Yeah, and I think part of it is that you get early on this is not going to be some sort of like one-to-one balancing of the scales, right? That it's
Yeah.
just like we're going to destroy this family, and that like Lena keeps repeating the three, so you think okay, only three deaths, so like you kind of have that in your mind as kind of a check. That like three of them have died, so she will take three lives back. But then yeah, when the kids disappear, when you start realizing that like some of these people are like not terribly involved, like even the fact that the minister
Well, yeah.
is like he's capitalizing on the crime wave, but he's just kind of preaching, and he's not deeply connected to the action the way that some of the other characters are. And when you start realizing like, oh no, he's got a target on him just as much as everybody else. Yeah, it's great. And again, still even again, up until that funeral card scene, the way that it keeps you in suspense of who is actually like kind of the force that's going to make it in here. It's not till that point that you start getting a sense of like Lena's like real capabilities. Yeah, and
Yeah.
and the fact that it never up until like the last 20 pages where it just kind of goes like, whoa. The fact that the viewpoint keeps shifting between people and like it's largely sympathetic towards a lot of them. Like even so like Duncan Fair, who's probably like the probably gets the most screen time of the stalwarts.
He
So
does, yeah.
he's the son-in-law who's a lawyer who had an affair with a prostitute who winds up getting executed because of her connection to a crime that she didn't commit,
Mhm.
which is sort of part of the inciting incidents. But like we spend a lot of time with Duncan, and he's not like a character that I'm in love with, but he seems like a fairly normal person. He's a little morally cowardly. Like it would have been great if he would have stood up a couple points, but he's just kind of doing what's expected of him. So to suddenly see like, oh no, like he's in this trap,
Oh
in
yeah.
this very like yeah, Count of Monte Cristo kind of way was really wild.
No, he's recognizably human, right? Even his
Mhm.
foibles, right? And his sort of like, I think his regrets around, oh my gosh, I am blanking out on the prostitute's name. And
Oh,
she's
is it Maggie?
yeah, Maggie, who's an
Hmm.
interesting,
Yeah,
and I think we should talk to her about her a
yeah.
little bit because I mean, she's mulatto
Hmm.
for Dr.
Or
Rune,
Octoroon, yeah.
really in the way that
Hmm.
in the racial classification
Yeah.
of that universe and of that book. And the I it's she's passing as white, right?
Hmm.
And yeah, it's sort of like there's some interesting treatment of race, I think, in the
Yeah.
novel
Oh
that
yeah.
I
It's mostly in the background.
and it is in the background, yeah.
Right? Like, so like you get the setup that like that the fact that she was discovered as mixed race was like disastrous when when she was younger. And you get some, you get some anti-Irish prejudice, you get some like real sort of exoticized alien depictions of people from China and New York. But the moment for me that just like jumped off the page was at her trial,
Oh yeah.
right? Where like again, so she was in bed with a client, and her husband, who she hadn't seen in ages, who she thought was in jail, shows up, a fight breaks out. Her client, who's a wealthy lawyer, winds up getting killed. And then her husband runs off, and then she eventually winds up going to prison and being sentenced to death for it. But there's a scene in her trial where one of the I think it's the woman who like sold her out, kind of maybe unintentionally, we don't really know, but just kind of like lets slip that, oh, and Maggie's mixed race, and the room just like erupts.
Yeah.
And it was just like that idea that like this could be the nail in someone's sentence is just the revelation of their racial history was just brutal. And
It
just
was brutal and so perceptive. I mean, McDowell has gotten some criticism for the way in which race sort of shows up I think in The Elementals is a really good example of that. But
mm,
like, yeah, it felt really finely tuned and kind of aware of the way in
yeah.
which the justice system and blackness in particular
Hmm.
will, intersect. And it was, yeah, it- she's a great character. I mean, I found her like both fascinating and interesting and another survivor, right? Like,
Hmm.
like somebody who is right up to the very moment, like the very moment of her death, just like really figuring out how to navigate a world that is just stacked against her in
Yeah.
every way. Yeah.
There's this super bleak line. So this is when she's in kind of on death's row. And it's just kind of like the narration's just following her a little bit. And it says, at 16, she had been plunged into a sea of misery and ignominy. And then, though her head had been raised above these turbulent black waters for a time, she understood that now she was sunk entirely beneath the waves, not to rise again.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just this this is such a picture of like one of the real divisions here, I think, is between like the upper crust who have this idea that like there's sort of a natural division in society and they're on the upper end of it and their star's just going to keep rising. And then everybody else really just wants to survive.
Yeah.
That's really the motivation for all of them. You don't get the sense that any of the criminals we meet are particularly like for its own sake vicious or for its own sake greedy. Like everyone's just kind of trying to get by. I think that that's what made me think about Hugo a little bit through this is
Oh
that
yeah.
that kind of sense.
No, it's absolutely true. And I mean, and it bears repeating, right? Lena has a very thriving criminal business, but it's a
Hmm.
business that she keeps contained, right? There's a real sort of like we do abortions, right? We do we do some laundering,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
right? Ostensibly behind the pawning, but the pawning is actually just a front for,
Hmm.
and that's it. And that's like, and everything functions. Nobody messes with us. We bribe the people that we need to bribe, and everything just works really well until the stalwarts really start kind of capriciously messing with it, right?
Yeah. Right. And like and explicitly, like we get that section where the judge says, like, I know this family, we need to destroy them. Like they'll be our target.
Yeah.
And it
I mean, we should also like one of the things that I also love about this novel that I think is sort of like delightful and also it has its own narrative logic that is the moment like if you were feeling like kind of grumpy or unkind about it would be like I can imagine people like complaining about like, oh yeah, the same judge who sentenced
mm, yeah.
Lena's husband to death is the same one who's responsible for the death of Lena's daughter, right? I
Hmm.
mean, there's a way in which you can be sort of like suspicious and go, wait a minute, this is an awful lot of coincidental
Hmm.
interconnections between these characters. And what I love about the novel and the way that McDowell builds this is that he actually makes a really good case for like, no, these are really small circles,
Yeah.
right? There is every reason to believe that the same judge is going to be hounding the same group of people,
Hmm.
and a reasonable expectation that like the um, that one of the son-in-law is going to be involved with like the prostitute that's
Right.
also connected to, right, all of these sort of like very, I don't know if you ever like there's a, I think it's a very New York thing, but like the way
Mm.
McDowell builds that geography makes it very
Hmm.
clear. It's like, no, these people are like literally almost
Yeah.
physically next to each
Right.
other.
Yep.
Yeah,
100%. No, and yeah, it never felt artificial to me. Like, yeah,
me
like
neither.
I dug it. And how much of like plot elements rely on like one character or another specifically being like, oh, I don't want to be seen, and how much of it has to do with like we are known enough, this community is tight enough that we need to be careful about who sees us where. There's a lot of disguises. There's that whole sequence where like Lena's kind of like hiding out in like a room just as like a lookout, like using mirrors, right, to look outside.
So good.
Yeah. Yeah, because yeah, it's a tiny little community. It's
It's a
geographically
tiny
not
world,
that
yeah.
big. And like it makes the novel makes a big point of the sort of like teeming, dense nature of New York. But this is also New York in 1880. This is not New York, of millions and millions and millions of people. It's a neighborhood.
Yeah. And that also kind of reminds me, right? Like part of what precipitates the sort of the re-encounter, right, between the stalwarts and Lena's clan is the fact that the ne'er-do-well son is sort of like going into the Black Triangle,
Hmm.
getting into like into debt and
Hmm.
like gambling away his,
Hmm.
so there's this real sort of like ways in which their world is intruding onto,
Yeah.
yeah,
That again, the upper crust wants to like think of the Black Triangle and the whole criminal element as this just sort of like disposable excess, right? That we could just kind of like get rid of all of them and it would be fine. But then every time we go into that world, it's like, oh, like here's all the upper crust drinking and going to the brothels and spending money at the gambling tables. Oh, poor Benjamin, what a sucker. He's just like
He's
this.
such a sucker.
Yeah.
It's a good death too.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, I'm trying to remember if he gets drugged,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
What
He gets drugged and then I think sliced, right? Like,
sliced. Yeah, they
yeah,
slice his, yeah,
his neck. Yeah.
but he
That
gets to be present for it,
I
which is
thought
always
that was a fascinating thing too. The two like female assassins
I
who are
love them.
yeah, and they're just like in a novel like where we follow almost every other character like at depth. They're just kind of there in this like really weird way that really like colors the back half of the book. Yeah, I dug
Yeah.
that.
So one that actually sort of reminds me of like something that we brought up in the beginning, but that I think is like clarifies it for me with the two assassins, is there's sort of this joyous freedom. And again, it's not freedom. Like they're having to scrape, they're having to like scrap, right? They're having to like, but there's a real sort of like life in the way that
Mhm.
the Lena's people live their lives, right?
Uh-huh.
They have they have some set of guidelines, but there's also this sort of like anarchic joy that is happening there that is absent in
Yeah.
the in rich New York.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to make too much of it, but it feels to me like so I'm a huge They Might Be Giants fan. And I
Likewise.
remember like the Johns like talking a little bit about how like Brooklyn in the late 70s, early 80s, like you would just go to these spaces and Lydia Lunch would be there. Like
Mm.
there'd be like there'd be stuff happening partly because nobody wanted to be in these spaces because everybody was afraid of crime and of
Uh,
like all this stuff happening. And there's something about that that sort of echoes to me the ways in which and again, like this is somebody who I did not experience it, I didn't see it, but there's something about that sort of like art house, Maplethorpe, Patti Smith kind of
yeah.
New York that feels like is part and parcel of the criminal Lena's criminal world as well.
Uh-huh. No,
Yeah.
I think you're totally right. There's yeah, there's a like a very specific kind of like class critique kind of thing going on where the stalwarts, they're wealthy, they're on the rise. If they hadn't run afoul of Lena, they'd probably, have had mayors in their lineage. But they're kind of like they're really hollow towards each other. They think of each other mostly in terms of like their position,
And their
if
functions,
and their
right? Like
function. Yeah.
what are the children for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah, and it feels very loveless. And then when you see the Shanks, where like there's certainly kind of a hierarchy and Lena's in charge, but it kind of feels like they're all doing it because they like each other and they like being competent at the things they do. And you see these moments of specifically like queer joy, right? Like we see two different
Mhm.
lesbian couples that are like important to the plot of the book, right? Because it's the Charlotte Cago and then I can't remember the name of the couple that Helen befriends, which is like another like underground female boxer and her lover, and they like take her in, and yeah, and it just has a sense of like yeah conviviality, and like sort of like I think there's something really deeply anarchic in this book in an interesting way, that
Yeah.
like this judge and this minister and this lawyer who represent the city and represent legality and represent God just get annihilated by these people that they've wronged, right?
Yeah.
And this sense that like, yeah, there's I don't know, there's something very against the idea of the social order that I think is reflected too in some of the quiet anger the book has about the racism, right?
Oh yeah.
That like we will destroy this thing that destroyed some of ours.
It is so satisfying. And then I also have to say, like, part of that is also with images and with situations that are like, to some degree, generally delightful, but also like I think in the hands of somebody else could have been like really upsetting. I think the first time we see Lena's children, they're carting a corpse around that
Yes.
they're going to
Uh-huh.
sell, right, for
Hmm.
to a medical
Uh-huh.
student,
Uh-huh.
right? And it is not it's not just that they're having fun doing it, is you can kind of feel that McDowell is having fun writing it. Like
Hmm.
there's here you go, here's these children, they are off with a little cart that has a the body of somebody whose abortion went wrong, and then they're
Hmm.
like, yeah,
Go get $7 for it.
go get $7 for it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. That's a weird place to take a break, but maybe we should take
Oh
uh
my gosh, it's like 50 minutes already.
yeah,
Yeah,
we
let's
should take a really quick
break.
break and then we'll come back. Yeah, just take a minute or two. All
All
right,
right.
talk to you in 1 sec. All right, we are back. We are still talking about Gilded Needles, a long, slow burn revenge story with a, I don't know, a 30-person cast that resolves in the end in this glorious, brutal, bloody thing. Oh, you know, one thing I had in my notes that I was thinking of with this was Titus Andronicus and
Oh my God, yes.
specifically Julie Taymor's film version of it with Anthony Hopkins, where it's just like the whole movie is just a setup for just this like explosion of horror and how much fake blood do we need to use just for this last little bit of revenge. And that's what this novel, like we've talked about that, like that slow lead up. Like you get the reveal with the funeral cards. Oh, you know, there's the other little reveal with when it's revealed that Louisa Shanks is the nurse for the stalwarts,
Yes.
right? They're like they don't know who she is. And it's just like this throwaway line that someone's like, "Oh yeah, the new nurse can't talk, but she's like big and strong and we know that
Immediately.
yeah." And I was just like, "Oh no." Like
Oh
that
no.
that was definitely another point where I was like, "Oh, okay, they are the ones carrying out the revenge for sure."
Yeah. No, I what you mentioned about Julie Taymor is really spot on. Partly one of the things that I sort of keep thinking about is how the conventions of genre are so sturdy that you can
Mm.
sort of do what you want to do with
Hmm.
them. And you can go I mean, Thomas Ligotti is one of my, you know, guiding figures. And I've heard people like say, like, he's like Bruno Schulz or Kafka or something. And
Mm.
they're right. It's like,
Hmm.
but there's also like creepy death stuff in it.
Hmm.
And with Tamor and Gilded Needles, it sort of reminds me that you can get away with like such a great degree of stylization and elegance and very formal, inventive, interesting things, partly because the sort of the superstructure or the ghost structure behind it is so sturdy that, you know, you'll arrive at the things that you want. The
Hmm.
slow burn, as long as you deliver, everybody's going to be delighted by, you know, a lot of people are going to be delighted by that ride.
Hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I've said this like 7 different ways this episode, but yeah, like going into this, you know, knowing it was framed as a horror novel just so changed the experience of it for me and really like preloads so much of the early scenes with this sort of like with this foreboding, with this I don't know, it kind of like doubles down on the vibes, right? That like there's so many scenes here of like horrific poverty that would have just been this kind of like, I don't know, sad social commentary. But when it's in the context of like, oh, like I know this might get darker than this at some point, it just adds this whole other layer to it.
Yeah.
I want to know. So this is the first McDowell I've read. And before you had suggested this book, I had not read anything about him and didn't know that he was involved in Beetlejuice and The Night Before Christmas and Thinner and Tales from the Crypt and lots of other stuff. What are your kind of like thoughts about his career, his impact on horror, his impact on you?
I mean, he's a huge guiding figure for me in general, just as a, you know, both for how beautiful the writing is, how it sort of reminds me of why I love horror as a genre,
Mm.
uh, but also just as so I'm a professor at Northwestern. Northwestern has McDowell's Death Collection in
Oh,
the library. I
wh-
haven't gone to yet because
what's his death collection?
it's weird, creepy stuff that he collected about death, like
Whoa.
including like children-sized caskets, which
Okay.
for our novel, perfect, you know,
Hmm.
perfectly fits, but other things. I have not been there. I'm going to. I'm eventually gonna definitely want to make a
Mm.
pilgrimage to. I'm saying like a pilgrimage. It's like it's a 10-minute walk, but
Yeah.
I to from my office to special collections, but I haven't been there yet. So there's that sort of weird personal collection. I
Hmm.
think the other thing that I find really, as a writer and as somebody who loves to write, McDowell had this famous quote about how he wasn't writing for the ages, right? He was writing for next month,
Hmm.
right? And uh, the I don't know, like the format, the paperback format itself, right? Which is on the one hand, ostensibly very disposable,
Hmm.
very, like, hey, like, you can pick this up at a drugstore and take it with you. And the knowledge that like Gilded Needles was going to be one of God knows how many books that were going to come out in the same format
Hmm.
every week. It also is a good way to relax a little bit about writing.
Hmm.
Um,
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, no, I often like I try to tell my students all the time. It's like, listen, like it takes a lot of time to write a book, and then the book comes out, and then there's going to be like 100 other books that are coming out that same week that
Hmm.
are as have as much right and as much sort of like wonderful sort of like reason to be there and to connect with people. So like, you can relax about your own
Yeah.
production and like just have fun, right?
Hmm.
Enjoy the fact that you're in this gigantic conversation with other people. And so yeah, that's part of it. But also there's this real totemic value to like the 80s paperback.
Hmm.
The embossed foil
Yeah.
is so even as an object is something that it feels to me like it has a real pull.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's weird that we feel like we've kind of moved beyond that. I don't know. I feel like it
Yeah.
might be. I feel like it might be circling back. I see like more popular genres like trying to find yeah, kind of like iconic totemic kind of forms. Like I'm thinking of like the way that romance has kind of like rebranded itself over the last 5 6 years and like has this very particular kind of like style and color palette, and they're trying to like get out there and get in people's hands. But yeah, that it's hard to beat that like mass market. Like I always think of like the spinner racks because that's where my town that I grew up in didn't have a bookstore because it was tiny, but it did have a drugstore. I think it was a Ben Franklin that had like 4 or 5 spinner racks, and that's where I would like go and look and see if there's anything I needed to pick up. Yeah, there's something to that form, and I love that idea of not trying to write for the future, but just trying to write for the moment. Because I feel like that maybe is the secret for writing to the future. Sometimes it's just really trying to hit your moment well. Like,
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, it's also weird because he's saying that on the one hand, and then on the other hand, as we keep saying, it's a meticulously researched historical
hmm,
novel that probably took, I mean, obviously took like a great deal of love and
yeah,
care, research,
pre-internet research.
pre-internet research, right? This
Yeah.
is, I mean, McDowell going into the archives and just like, all right, what did people, and it feels like it doesn't feel like there's like we were saying, like it's not like this is homework or this is
Hmm.
like dutiful or anything. It's delightful, but it's also a lot of work.
Yeah. And this is not like a formulaic novel, right? It's not like there were like he hadn't written like 20 novels exactly like this and just switched
Yeah.
the names out, right? Like this
No,
is
this was
and it
like his second book.
yeah, that's wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's real. I the quote I saw somewhere was that Stephen King called him like the master of paperback writing or something like that, or like the finest paperback producer. Like,
Which is, I think, coming from King, who was, I mean, he had his books out with it's Doubleday, right? I think he
I
would have
think so,
been
yeah.
Doubleday, right? Yeah, but like he was finding, so he had like they were hardback originals, but like he was flourishing with this 80s boom of like the paperback. So it's a high compliment, and at the same time, like being called the world's finest paperback writer of paperback horror.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also like this is the world's tallest, shortest
Hmm.
person, right?
Right.
It's
Yeah. Yeah. Right. The lowest,
yeah,
highest point. Yeah.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's no, and it's just to get it back to like that same idea of the aesthetic, right? It's the fact that it's a book that celebrates the undersung and the underworld,
Hmm.
and McDowell himself is both as a queer writer and as a writer who is like working in maybe genres that people did even then did not appreciate or love
Hmm.
enough, was also, you know,
Yeah. I mean, it is funny to think of that too, like in context. Like, I think there's been maybe in the last 10, maybe more than maybe in the 21st century, there's been a kind of reappraisal of like pop genres as being more like worthy of attention. But I think yeah, these would have been treated much more disposably, right? When they came out. Like,
Yeah.
that's a funny thought. I've thought in like more in science fictional spaces, a lot of times we really bemoan the death of like the mid-list working author that like where you can just put out a novel every couple years and you just keep doing that for forever. And it's like it's okay if they're not all great, if they're kind of like the thing you want to be doing. And I feel like there's so much pressure now to like I mean, obviously I think people's lives have changed and it's harder to produce at that volume for lots of reasons. But there's so much pressure like everything's going to be the next huge thing. And I think there's
Right.
something really freeing and just like, no, just do your thing and just kind of be in the middle of the thing you're doing. Like,
No, it's true. And then like I mean we can go on with so many examples, right? But Philip K. Dick, right? Like
hmm
writing a novel a month.
hmm
I mean, it took a lot of amphetamines, right?
yeah.
Uh,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, and like I think I've talked this with other people, like even the not great, like even the like everybody, I think people who get into Philip K. Dick, like everybody has like their favorite like deep cut Philip K. Dick, and
Uh-huh.
it's always
Yeah.
different.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
it's
100%. I'm so
yeah.
I'm always bring up I'm like kind of a CJ Cherryh scholar.
Oh wow.
Read like every and she has published like roughly a book a year since like 1978 or something like that and is still doing it. Um,
Wow.
and it's like, so like when you've written 60 novels, like some of them aren't great, but it gives you this room to play around with and like to get these like really interesting gems that you wouldn't get to if you were just trying to write your one great novel, right? Like,
Right. And I mean, everybody's different. Everybody has two things, but I feel like my favorite, I think, quote about writing in terms of publication is Anne Lamott in Bird by Bird saying like the best thing about like getting a book published is that you finally get it off your desk.
mm,
You
huh,
get to be on the page with something new, right? And I mean, I think about that with Stephen King in some ways and how amazing his late period has been and how
mm-hmm,
productive and weird and wildly experimental it's
mm-hmm,
to some degree. It's also like him doing the things that he does really well as well.
mm-hmm.
But I also, and I just realized I need to remove the names of everybody in this anecdote just to
Ah,
not break any confidences.
uh-huh.
But it was a dear friend and we were talking about somebody else who we both admire, who's a prolific literary writer.
hmm
And I was asking her, like, oh yeah, like he's so like I don't understand how he does it. And then she says, oh no, I asked him. I asked him how he can be this prolific.
hmm
And the way that he put it to me was, oh, I write one good book and
hmm
then I allow myself for the next book to be like not great or mediocre.
Huh,
And he just goes into it knowing like, one's going to take work and it's going to be deeply researched.
hmm
And then the other one, I'm just going to like squeeze out. And then
huh,
that's how this particular writer who,
yeah,
yeah, who just is incredibly prolific and actually, and then when she said it to me like that, I kind of went back and looked at this like, oh yeah,
interesting. You kind
I
of
can
see
see, I know
see
which
the
ones are
rhythm.
which.
No, it's fascinating. I don't know. I think about it a lot, particularly in genre writing, where, yeah, if the pressure is less to like create one shining perfect thing, but more
Mhm.
to just kind of be in the practice of
Yeah,
doing this kind of thing in this kind of space. There's something kind of interesting and kind of freeing about that.
it is. And it's healthier. I think it's healthier for writers to sort of like see and put themselves in that space rather than in the space of like, I mean, it also like puts you in a conversation, right?
hmm
As opposed to like thinking of yourself as this single isolated figure who must
Yeah,
produce a thing of genius or whatever.
yeah. Huh, that's really interesting. Oh, well, this has been a great talk. We haven't even talked about we've barely talked about opium.
Oh my
But
gosh,
I
forgot about the
know.
opium.
Yeah, but that's okay.
Yeah.
This has been a great talk. Tell us where what are you excited about? Where can people find you? Are you working on anything you want to share with people?
Well, okay. So I'm working on a new horror novel. I'm very excited about it. I don't want to say I'm not going to say too much about it other
Okay.
than it's kind of folk horror-ish.
Okay.
It's funny, which is something that I've been sort of like realizing I was missing
Mm.
in I'm doing a bunch of stories. I'm actually finishing up one for this really cool, like all Latina anthology
Oh,
that's
cool.
going to come out next year. Yeah. Cynthia
What's the name of
Pelayo
that one?
is The Ghosts of Where We Come From. Ghosts of Where
Oh,
We Come From, I think.
yeah. I
It's
think I just saw like an early. I don't know if it was a TOC, but at least like a writer lineup for that. That looked wonderful.
it's an amazing lineup. Mariana Enriquez is in there.
Yeah.
Like Ananda's in there, and
Uh-huh.
Andalina's there. Like a bunch of like really, really great writers. It feels really exciting to be part of that conversation.
Yeah. That looked like a
Uh,
really like nice range of like kind of like, like current horror greats to like indie writers and more like lit scene kind of writers. And yeah, it was a really nice looking lineup.
it's a great lineup. It's that imprint is going to be really cool. It's bilingual,
Okay.
which so I
Nice.
think
Yeah.
unless I could be misunderstanding the release, but my understanding is that like every book is going to be released both in English and in Spanish.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So that I'm really excited about.
Mhm.
I yeah, and I think I can say this. I'm actually going to be doing a little bit of coverage for the protests that are going to
Okay.
be happening
Uh-huh.
uh,
For the DNC.
for the DNC for the Believer.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, I mean it's like they're going to have like real reporters at the convention, and so this is just sort of like
More like writerly kind of coverage of
writerly
it.
kind of like person just sort of stumbling around,
Okay.
eating
Cool.
snacks and talking to people and
Yeah.
stuff.
Awesome. Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
Well,
so that's what I'm doing.
well,
And
be
then
s- be
I'm
safe. Power to the
online.
protesters. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm online all the time because I'm the father of two young children, and that means I'm on my phone while things are happening.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, and I'm easy to find. I'm Fulmer Ford, and I'm on Instagram and on Threads.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been really great. And thank you for taking my like extremely loose prompt of like I want to talk about 80s paperbacks basically and giving me this book, which otherwise I might not have run into for a long
I
time.
am so
So
glad that you got to experience this. It's
yeah,
yeah.
that was awesome.
And I hope people pick it up. I mean, it really is the kind of like good, and it's the re-release has a good forward too, if I
Hmm.
remember right. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Christopher Fowler did a nice bit
Oh,
for it.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks so much. And we'll sign off. A Meal of Thorns is a podcast from the Ancillary Review of Books, an online magazine founded to address the radical possibilities of criticism, with a focus on speculative fiction, world literature, and utopian impulses. Go to ancillaryreviewofbooks.org for regular reviews, essays, interviews, and more. Our opening poem is by Bartrahari, translated by John Bruff. Our music is by Giselle Gabrielle Garcia. Our artwork is by Rob Patterson at The Ratio Farm. If you'd like to support the podcast and the Ancillary Review of Books, that is rad. A few different ways you can do that. Subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/ancillary review. That would be super cool of you. We really want to get the ARB to a point where we can pay our contributors. Check out our show notes for bookshop links. If you buy a book through there, we get a cut. The internet, as you know, is a dying hellscape, stalked by mindless algorithms. Do your part to resist, or at least be a little more mindful. Click like, click share, leave a comment or review wherever you find us. Tell someone you know to check us out. It really helps. Questions, suggestions, pedantic notes about things we got wrong? Drop us an email at mealofthorns@gmail.com. All right, next time. It will still be October, and we've got horror writer Sunny Moraine joining us. Although not to talk about a horror novel, unless you consider the ravenous, homogenizing field of multinational corporate capital and its attendant demons of marketing and social media to be horror, in which case, we've got you covered. We're talking about William Gibson's Pattern Recognition. It's a good one. If you're listening to this, and also you're going to be attending the World Fantasy Conference in Niagara Falls this month, please say hi. I'll be around. I may even be packing some secret Meal of Thorns swag. Thanks for listening. Keep reading the good stuff out there.